Mark Rogers TV talking Big 12 football, and it's been a situation for the past few weeks, and we're going to see it down the stretch. Kansas State, TCU, Baylor. When they play each other, they're basically elimination games at this point. And we've got a huge one at Fort Worth with the Horned Frogs hosting Kansas State. We bring in Ty Berger of Bring On the Cats, his Wildcats in action at number 7, TCU at number 6. Ty, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So, it happens every time. We listen to these analysts on the national scene. They cannot mention Kansas State. I would like to have kept record this year. They cannot mention, without giving the disclaimer, that they're lacking in some athleticism, they're really technically and fundamentally sound, and give all sorts of credit to the ability to overcome that. So how much of that is reality and how much of that is myth?
It's definitely a little bit of both. K-State gets that knock as a team that doesn't have a ton of talent, doesn't have a ton of athleticism, because they don't recruit 4- and 5-star players. And the stars are a nice, easy way to reference the athleticism and the football ability of a player coming out of high school or coming out of junior college. What K-State does, and I say what K-State does, there are a lot of things that K-State does. K-State identifies athletic players who are undersized or underskilled or may switch positions or something like that. They bring them in. They basically redshirt everybody. You almost never ever play as a true freshman unless you're a Tyler Lockett. And once you've had 1 year, 2 years, more likely 2 or 3 years at least in the system, you're going to understand your role. You're going to execute it over and over and over again with precision, and you're going to be bigger and stronger. I don't think that I don't know a ton about our strength and conditioning program, just like nobody knows anything about anything inside of our program. So I don't know enough to say whether it's really cutting edge or anything like that. But once you're in a major college strength and conditioning program for 2 or 3 years, you're going to be a lot bigger and a lot stronger and probably even a little bit faster than you were coming out of high school when you were a 2-star or 3-star recruit. So that's really, in a nutshell, what they do. They bring in these players like that. They sprinkle in some guys who have elite athleticism, like a Tyler Lockett. You've got a cornerback in Danzel McDaniel, who's a big, strong guy, probably one of the best tacklers among cornerbacks in the country. And you're just really fundamentally sound on defense. You execute your schemes over and over again, and you have really good tacklers at the safety positions who can come up and clean up a mess. You have linebackers who can turn around and run in coverage, and you have linebackers who can come up and hit in the running game. And you have a defensive line that says, okay, we're not ever going to get any credit, but we're going to stand up our blocks, keep the linebackers clean, let them flow to the ball, and maybe we get lucky, we'll shed a tackle and make a tackle for loss every once in a while. And that's it. Execute over and over again and trust that other teams will play like college players and make mistakes.
All right, let's talk about the quarterback situation. I would think Michael Bishop is the athletic standard at K-State as a quarterback. When it comes to accolades, that's Colin Klein, who almost won the Heisman a few years ago and might have won it had lost that game down the stretch against Baylor. I'm watching Jake Waters at times near the end of last season. Then it's especially hit me against Oklahoma that this kid can really throw the football. No, he's not a freak of an athlete where he can throw from different arm angles and do whatever he wants and sling it all over the field, but he's technically sound and he delivers the football. And I thought back to Colin Klein, and I thought, this kid's got to be, as a complete quarterback, better than Colin Klein. And I hope I'm not stepping on any sacred ground when I say that.
It's been a subject of debate among K-State fans, and it seems to come up on our blog every once in a while. Who do you think the best 5 quarterbacks in K-State history are? Obviously, Bishop is always at or near the top. Colin Klein's at or near the top. I think when Jake Waters is done, I think he's going to be right in the conversation near the top there. And I frankly think he's at least a little bit, if not quite a bit, underappreciated by K-State fans right now. He was in a dogfight with Daniel Sams last year. They split time throughout the early part of the season. It really wasn't until November that it became Jake Waters' team. We started off disappointing last year, ended up 8-5. So we finished strong. And now we're off to a good start this year, 7-1, and he's really filled into the role. Colin Klein is actually on staff now as I believe, a grad assistant, and I really think that you've seen the maturation of Jake Waters in the running game for K-State, and I think that I would be shocked if Colin Klein had not played a role in that, because Colin Klein was so good in the running game for K-State. Really the biggest difference between the two, there are two big differences. Jake Waters is a better passer than Colin Klein. He has a quicker release, he's more accurate, throws a really good deep ball. Colin Klein was more than adequate for what K-State does, but he was not much above average as a passer. Where Colin Klein was better than Jake Waters, Colin Klein was a big, strong guy who was faster than he looked, and he could take a beating over a season. He took a beating over 2 different seasons. Jake Waters is not as big, not as strong. He's probably close to as fast as Colin Klein, and he's fairly shifty. But Colin Klein was probably a more effective runner, I would say.
Ty, I'm going to go back to the stereotype or the label, because we watch the top teams in college football, the Florida States, the Ohio States, and not just talking about this year, but year after year after year, the SEC top teams, and you see these wide receivers just, when they go 4 or 5 wide, it seems like they got all sorts of talent out there, and they're just almost interchangeable. Maybe they got a go-to guy, but then after that, they've got a number of guys. For you, it's like, go cover Tyler Lockett, put as many guys as you need to on that guy because he's just special, and then after that, it's, okay, well, let's piece something together. Curry Sexton's had an exceptional year. Just talk about the focus of the passing game, because it would seem to be fairly routine or simplistic for the defense to key on Lockett and try to have these other guys beat them, but it's working.
The nice thing about having a guy like Bill Snyder in charge of your team and offensive coordinators like Del Miller and Dana Dimmel is that they will find weaknesses in the defense and they will just pick at them over and over again. They will just pick at you wherever you're weak. The nice thing about Tyler Lockett is even when you devote extra attention to him, he's still really difficult to cover. He's extremely fast, and even the most impressive thing about Lockett is that he is such a precise route runner. He's such a technician as a wide receiver. He just kills teams on stop-and-go routes, and you will see it against TCU, because TCU is a very aggressive defense, and you saw it last year when Jason Barrett bid on the stop route, and Lockett was upfield before Barrett even realized what was going on and caught, I think, a 75-yard touchdown pass on that play. So he's really difficult to cover even when you give extra attention to him. The nice thing is when you devote extra attention to him, which everybody does, there's a second receiver in Curry Sexton who is also a precise route runner, very good hands, and certainly not an elite athlete, not elite speed, not elite shiftiness, but he will get upfield, and if you give him room, he will hurt you for a big gain. And beyond that, like I said, this coaching staff is so good at saying, okay, if you're going to devote 2 players to Tyler Lockett, that means that we're going to be able to find something somewhere else that we can beat you with. And maybe it's, if they had another Tyler Lockett or another elite receiver, you would be beating them for long plays because of that. Because the other guys are not elite athletes like Tyler Lockett, you beat him for 7 yards here and 15 yards here and then 11 yards here. And you just pick at it over and over and over again, and you drive down the field in 9, 10 plays, and you score, and you take 4.5 minutes off the clock.
While we're on this path, Ty, we'll get back to the game matchup here in just a second, because I think this is kind of interesting. Is there thought among the K-State faithful, because you build up a program that's this strong year in, year out, at the very least you're going to win 7 or 8 games. Sometimes you're going to find yourself, as you have a number of times in the thick of a national championship race, compete for Big 12 championships consistently. Is there talk at some point that the big recruits should be coming our way at some point, in addition to us having to coach them up? That's great that we're able to do that, but when are the recruiting classes going to go from being maybe 35 in the country to 15 or 12 or something in that range?
At the end of Snyder's first tenure, they won the Big 12 title in 2003, and Snyder said later, years later, that after they did that, they all of a sudden found themselves with players who were higher rated recruits showing more interest in K-State. And they pursued those guys, but they always ended up, those guys had interest, but they always ended up second or third on their list. And in recruiting battles, if you don't win, you've invested resources in something that pays zero dividends. So they ended up getting burned by going after some of these guys that they didn't get. They hadn't been in on guys that they really would have liked to have gotten, and those guys had already committed elsewhere by the time signing day rolled around. So this time around, despite the success, the 2012 Big 12 title, all that, they've stuck with their philosophy, and they've said that we know that we can win this way, and the fan base has come around to it. Every fan base kind of wants to chase the stars, and it seems like it certainly is the easier way to build a program if you can get those guys. You can deploy guys that can play their first year, their second year at a very high level. But if you just accept who you are and have an identity and stick to it over and over again, it can be successful, and K-State's proven that.
Yeah, I just thought I'd throw that out there. I'm sure Bill Snyder knows what he's doing. So one more question, just sizing up this game, definitely. Sizing up this game against TCU. The Horned Frogs joined the Big 12. They made their hay as a BCS buster with an NFL quarterback at one time in Andy Dalton, but also mostly defense. It was all on defense. And then they come into the league and they struggle to get wins. They're very competitive, but they struggle to get wins because they can't score. Then all of a sudden, two new offensive coordinators, Trevon Boykin's just a guy that you would have never thought was a wide receiver just a couple of years ago, scoring 82 points. I know it's Texas Tech, but 82 points and scoring on everybody. So kind of size things up, this TCU offense that seems to have athletes all over the place, and this Kansas State defense that has obviously been very fundamentally sound in getting the job done.
Watching TCU last year, you could see the potential that they had. They have some really good athletes all over the field. Casey Paul Hall could hit. He was a pretty good passer when he wasn't hurt or wasn't suspended for drug or alcohol issues. They had potential. They really. I feel like their offensive coordinators the previous years were not very creative and were not very good at exploiting matchups and recognizing situational opportunities. They were pretty bland in the running game, just a bunch of zone read over and over again and zone stretch and that kind of thing, and then just, nothing special in the passing game. And yeah, it's been amazing to watch. You've got Dotson and Listenby out there catching passes and making big plays. You got Cattle on if he plays. He got dinged up against West Virginia, so we'll see if he plays. But he's a pretty solid running back, and man, yeah, Trevon Boykin. I was a little surprised today to find out he was only completing 57% of his passes, but man, compared to where he was even a year ago, that's amazing for him. And when you have a guy like that, you have to stay so disciplined on the defensive line, even on passing plays, because if you get out of your lanes and he sees an opening, he's going to be downfield, and then you've got your wide receiver Trevon Boykin downfield making people miss.
So Ty, I guess the Big 12, for the neutral fan of the Big 12, or another innocent bystander who wants the Big 12 to make it into this college football playoff, maybe they don't care who wins on Saturday, but whoever it is needs to keep winning, because if they cannibalize each other, then they get left out, which I just think is tragic if the Pac-12 or the Big 12 or even the Big 10 having a down year gets left out of this, because I just think that's nonsense. 4 slots, 5 conferences, just doesn't make sense to me. But so obviously this is where we stand. It looks like an elimination game, but should be a whole lot of fun.
Absolutely, it will be. And yeah, I agree. If you're a neutral observer and you say, well, I want the Big 12 to get a team in, I guess your bet is probably TCU, because they definitely have an easier road after Saturday than K-State does. K-State still has to go on the road to Morgantown on a Thursday night, play West Virginia, who's been a lot better this year, and then they've got to go down to Waco and play those Baylor Bears at the end of the season. And we know how late season trips to Waco work out for K-State when they're in national title contention. So hopefully we get in that position this year and don't have the same result as we did in 2012.
Ty Berger of Bring on the Cats on the SB Nation platform for Kansas State Athletics. Hey, Ty, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate the insight. It was great.
Anytime, Mark. Appreciate it, and hopefully we have a few more big games where I can join you to discuss later this year.